Hey, what's up, guys? It's your buddy Tim, and I'm driving to work right now. As you see, I am wearing my safety harness, and I got my eyes ahead of me. I'm looking at the road because I'm aware that probably some of you aren't too comfortable with the idea of a guy driving around making YouTube videos. But I assure you that I'm following all the rules of the road, and everybody around me is perfectly safe right now. And with that said, I just got a little time to kill because I'm driving to work, and there's something I was thinking about that I wanted to share with you guys. Also, I know that, content has been, I haven't been posting much on the channel lately. I've just been so busy with life, and maybe I wouldn't normally put up a video like this. But you know what? It's only a matter of time before YouTube cans this channel anyways. All my favorite YouTube channels are disappearing around me. So I don't really care. I think you guys will enjoy this video. And if you don't, just skip it. Okay. So with all that said, this is what I wanted to share with you guys. I want to tell you a little story about this guy that I worked with one day. So to set this up, you need to understand that I was born and raised in a Christian home, but I started backsliding, and I professed to be a Christian as a teenager and as a kid, again, growing up in that environment. But by my late teens, I was really backsliding, and I really, I don't know if I was even saved, really. I was far more interested in the world and in my own worldly pursuits, which for me, I wanted to pursue a music career, which I successfully did for over a decade. So anyways, when I moved out, I went far away from the church and from the faith and from Christ, and I just totally embraced and experienced everything this world has to offer. And as I chased down this music dream, and started a bunch of different bands and toured around and did all that music stuff, I held down a lot of different jobs. I believe that my current job is my 24th job, if I'm correct about that. That's what I think, last time I counted. But man, I've had so many jobs because while pursuing my artistic endeavors in my music career, whenever I would have a job that would interfere with my music schedule, well, I would just lose the job, and then just get another job. And so I would always have these dead-end jobs that didn't pay that much. And well, anyways, so one of them, probably one job that I really hated, but also that I have a lot of memories from, was at this place called Top Notch Distribution in Toledo, Ohio. And it was like a direct sales company. I was one of those people. I was practically a legal solicitor, really. Although I'm not even sure how much of what we did was legal, because I was one of those guys that you see walking around in a shirt and tie with a duffel bag full of all types of random crap, It would be like product launch products, and promotional products for this or that company. And they would hire us and companies like us to send guys like me out into the city, and I would just go knock on doors and go into office buildings and try to talk to the boss and essentially try to sell them, this random weird crap, and get them to buy it, for their whole office. And it was just direct sales. It wasn't really a good job. And I hated doing sales. I was always too nervous for it. And anyways, but every day we would load up, our cars. Sometimes you would go along with somebody else and they would ride along with you in your car, or you'd ride with their car. And there was only like 10 employees, 10 of us salesmen. And then some dude named, what was his name? I guess it doesn't matter. The boss guy, he was like this dorky dude, this like curly red hair, tall, skinny guy with thick glasses, but he was really funny. And he was really interested in just getting rich fast, And so again, Top Notch Distribution, it was like, it was legal, but practically we'd get raced out or rushed out of everywhere that we would try to go in and sell stuff, and people would point us to the signs that say no soliciting, and we'd say, oh, I'm sorry. And the guy that ran it was making a whole bunch of money, because it was kind of a pyramid scheme where whatever I sold or whatever anybody sold, he got a percentage of, and we all got paid cash. And for guys that were good salesmen that didn't mind, being dishonest and just doing what it took to sell the stuff, they could actually make really good money at this job. And then guys like me, who were more honest and not really salesman type people, we did not do very well at that job. And that's why I didn't have it for that long. Okay, so That's up. Got to get some gas. So this is the thing. One day, there was this new dude. This guy started. He probably only worked there for like 2 or 3 days, and I forget his name. So for the sake of the story, we'll just say his name was JT, because he looked like the kind of guy that would be named JT. Then again, I did have a friend there that was named JT, so maybe that's where that's coming from. Let's just call him John. Let's just call him John. And so anyways, one day, and John, this guy, he was like a pretty ripped, kind of, rugged looking dude, maybe 10 years older than me. Maybe he was in his mid 30s. I was in my like early 20s at that time. And he was just covered in tattoos, like sleeve tattoos, and he just had scars on his face that looked like they were the result of some type of combat. And he was just a rough dude that looked like, he definitely was street smart. But he was a cool dude, and he was nice. And he would like chain smoke cigarettes, which I could relate to, So we would always be outside smoking cigarettes together at the office. And but this is, again, so he'd only been there for a few days. And the first time that me and him did this trip together, he's driving in my car, and I have a bowl of weed sitting in my dashboard, right? And I just assume that this guy is going to be cool, and want to smoke weed with me while we're driving to Detroit, because that's where we were going to be doing our sales that day. And so we're just driving and cruising, and I'm just talking about my music and shows. I mean, I don't know what we were talking about, but we're just shooting the stuff. And then I asked him to open my glove box and pass me my bowl of weed, which he did, and he hands it to me, and I hit it, and then I ask him if he wants to hit it. I pass it to him, and he's like, "Oh no, man, I don't touch that stuff." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't." And he was like, "No, it's cool." And anyways, this guy goes on then to tell me how, weed and alcohol and drugs used to have a real control over his life, and used to have a real hold on him, but then that he got saved. And this guy starts witnessing to me. As it turns out, he's a born-again Christian. He's somebody that did live a hard life, and he did spend a bunch of time in prison, and he did come from the streets and all that, but he got saved when he was in jail. And I just had him I judged the book by the cover. I totally thought that he was going to be, I was almost trying to appeal to him by even just doing something so risky as to openly smoke weed in front of him while we're driving, at the workplace. But I'm looking at his tattoos, just the look of him, the way he talks, the chain smoking cigarettes. So I never expected that he was actually a born again Christian. And here I am, like a way backslidden Christian. Didn't even, maybe, I wasn't really saved, I guess, because I didn't even consider myself a Christian at that time. Although I did always have the conviction in my heart, I always had God knocking at the door, and I always felt kind of guilty in my sin. But anyways, that wasn't something that I wasn't living that life. And here I am getting witnessed to by this guy that I was judging to be, so far from Christ. And as it turned out, so and that convicted me. And the stuff that he was saying to me, man, he went on to tell me about the things he'd been through and how he's encouraging me to stop doing drugs, and he's encouraging me to change my life. And he's even kind of calling me out for some stuff that he's noticed about me in the few days that we worked together, not in a mean way, but just things that I would say and the language that I would use. And he was just reminding me how, the Bible says that, the tongue is as sharp as a two-edged sword, and you can, if you call your brother a fool, that's like murder. And he goes on to say how, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says to even lust after women is like adultery, and how, if you hate somebody, you might as well have killed them. And he goes on to say, so I'm guilty. Speaking of himself, he says, he's guilty of breaking all 10 of the commandments. Goes on to express to me why I am as well. And it was the weirdest thing, because I already knew this. I was raised in the church, and I was just sort of, I just felt, and I appreciated what he was telling me. So this is the thing. So I appreciated what he was telling me, and I was embarrassed kind of spiritually inside, just because I was like, man, how far have I gone back now that, somebody's witnessing to me as if I don't even know the gospel. And I don't recall that going on to tell him how I already knew that stuff, or that I already understood the Bible. I think I was embarrassed. I just kind of played it off that I didn't know, and I was just like, oh, thanks, that's real tough. I don't remember. It's a long time ago. And I don't know why I just happened to think of this guy this morning, but I did. So that guy, he was an ambassador for Christ, right? You wouldn't know it by looking at him. An unlikely ambassador for Christ, because Christ is perfection. Christ is God, But it says in 2 Corinthians, I think, chapter 5, that we are ambassadors as Christians, that we are ambassadors of Christ, right? And that guy had a bunch of flaws, I'm sure. He had a bunch of sins. But when it came down to it, and when he was in a position with me, he preached the gospel to me. And he represented Christ. That's what an ambassador is, Like if you're an ambassador to America, or an American ambassador, then you go to these different foreign countries and you represent America's interests, And that's what we are as Christians, We are representatives of Christ. And that's a heavy burden to bear, because obviously Christ is perfect. Jesus is pure and holy and good and righteous, and we are sinners and dark and, the very opposite of Jesus in many ways, even Christians, even those who follow him, And here we are with this role and responsibility to be ambassadors. And so I was thinking about that guy, and I was thinking about myself as an ambassador of Christ, because I'm an ambassador of Christ as well. That's what I'm doing with this channel here. And I think about my workplace, where everybody knows that I'm saved, that I'm a Christian, I don't hide that. Not only do I have a public channel where I publicly promote the gospel, but in my private life, I also almost every day there's just numerous things that'll come up in conversation that for me, I see everything through the lens of somebody who's, saved and who's living in Christ. And so even talking to my non-saved friends, I always end up redirecting so many conversations back to the Bible, not just to be preachy, just because that's really my worldview, so that's me contributing to the conversation. Also, I am being aware that, I want my friends to be saved. I don't want anyone's soul to be damned to hell. And so so I witness all the time. So in that way, I'm an ambassador. But just like this dude that I decided we would call John, these guys are also seeing me smoke cigarettes. They're hearing me swear. They're hearing me complain about my wife sometimes when we're fighting at home. Friends, people that see me out in the world, these people that are aware of my sins, And so it's just an interesting thing, because on one hand, it's such a privilege and such an honor and such a blessing as a born-again Christian to be able to call yourself an ambassador of Christ and to have that good news. We got the very best. We have the answer to life, and it's our responsibility to share it, to share the bread of life with everybody. So that's great and that's awesome. But then we also bear the responsibility of understanding that as ambassadors of Christ, our reputation is bound to Christ. And so if we're going to be living in sin, like I often do, when we do that, we're dragging Christ's name through the mud. Here I am, an ambassador of Christ. And then while it's good when I'm witnessing to my friends, it's really, really bad when I'm sinning openly and comfortably in front of my friends, right? Because I'm hinged to Jesus. They're looking at me, and even that is a reflection of Christ and my representation of Christ and my Christian walk. So, but you know what? I was touched by that dude, John, and I could relate to him. And he was in a place in his life where, I didn't tell you the end of the story, by the way. That guy only worked there for a few more days and then stopped coming to work. And it turned out that he got pulled over, and there was a warrant out for his arrest. He got pulled over on the job when he was out working with someone else, and there was a warrant for his arrest, and he went back to prison. And I don't know, I never heard from him again, and that was just the end of it. For all I know, he's still in jail. I don't know anything about the guy's backstory, but I know that he was a born-again Christian. For all I know, he was on the run from the law. It sounds like he was. But in that moment, he opened his mouth and he shared the gospel with me, and he preached to me. Somebody who myself was just backslidden. I wasn't even unaware of the gospel. I was aware of the gospel. I knew God. And it took this guy who was living a hard life and wrapped up in all types of sin and mess, but who did have, Christ, who a born-again Christian man. That was the state of his life at that time. God used him to touch me. I think of where I'm at now, and I just mentioned, all the sins and, some of the not so pleasant character traits that I might still exhibit, and the way that might negatively impact my testimony, but maybe not. Maybe in some ways God's using me where I'm at right now to reach these people. You know, maybe some of these guys at work would never step foot into a church or wouldn't be inclined to go talk to some pastor guy, you know, wearing a 3-piece suit, who would never, you know, touch a glass of wine or a cigarette or anything like that because he's been living clean. And more power to that guy, you know. And I aspire to one day be living a fully clean lifestyle myself, you know. I mean, I want to get all the sin out of my life. But maybe God is using me right now, where I'm at, to reach people that can relate to where I'm at right now. Because I got the one key, which is the gospel truth, which is that we can be forgiven for our sins. It's the Great Commission. We just got to share the gospel. You know, my pastor just preached a whole sermon about it, but for all the complexities and of theology, it really does all boil down to just sharing the simple gospel. What's that simple gospel? That you are separated from God by your sin, but that God is able and willing and desires to forgive you for that sin. And he's made that possible through his own death on the cross, through the death of his son on the cross, his son being himself God, as a substitution for the punishment of our sin, so that the penalty for our crime has already been served on God's behalf. And you guys already know. So this is the salvation message. You share that, and you're being an ambassador for Christ. And that dude, John, whether he's in prison now, maybe he's a pastor now for all I know. I don't know. Maybe he's got some YouTube channel. I don't know. I wonder if he even remembers me. But I appreciate that he followed his conviction on that day to open his mouth and to speak truth to me. And I think it's beautiful that God was able to use that man at that time, despite all his flaws, in a way that really had an impact on my life. And I felt very convicted by the words that he spoke to me. Video's at 17 minutes right now. It's at 18 minutes. So I'm going to stop rambling. Just bored, just driving to work. Just thought I'd pop on and talk with you guys a little bit. But that's what I was thinking about. It's kind of a disconjointed story. Not good at telling stories. My mind races and wanders far too much. That's why I'm a narrative style filmmaker. But I don't know. Maybe you guys got something from that. If nothing else, then maybe a little entertainment. But yeah, guys, we're ambassadors for Christ. If you're saved, if you're following God, if you're bought by the blood of Christ, then you are an ambassador for Christ. And our reputations are a reflection of our testimony, okay? And so it is important, you know. It is something that's kind of scary that we need to proceed into this world with the full understanding that, people will be judging not only us by our actions, but also Christ and our faith by our actions if we are outwardly sharing the gospel like we're supposed to be. But on the other hand, don't let that keep you from sharing the gospel, and don't think that you are not worthy to be spreading the good news, because you absolutely are, because it's the good news. The gospel is a gospel for sinners, and you don't got to get cleaned up before God can use you. The second that you're saved, God starts using you and cleaning you up. And so, my best testimony to anybody has been people that know me the best, that are just watching year after year as I grow more sanctified, and we're all kind of on that path. But yeah, there's no better time than right now to just start just sharing your faith with those around you, like that dude did for me. And if you ever see this out there, guy whose name I can't remember, that worked for Top Notch Distribution in the early 2000s with all the tattoos, thank you. Have a good day, guys. I love you.